In today's video, I go over Byleth Eisner in Three Hopes. This video will serve as a review and critique of their execution in both their role as an antagonist and as an ally. Byleth really reminds me of the series' past Navarre archetypes, although I guess in this case, since we're talking about a Warriors game, they're more of a Lubu than anything. Byleth doesn't have a place in the story beyond that they are currently a force of nature standing in the Lord's way. At the same time, they don't have much personal stock in the conflict. They're just here doing their job. That is what Geralt and Byleth are doing, and this is the entire premise of them being recruited to Shez's side. And it's actually one of the things I think the writers did properly when it came to writing Byleth as an enemy to begin the game. Sure, things between Byleth and Shez escalate quickly when they fight each other, as they push each other to their limits, forcing them to call upon Sothis and Arval respectively, but this is nothing more than a rivalry between the two of them, up until things get very personal for Byleth. They're quite literally two mercenaries battling each other over and over again. Furthermore, the story does well enough to sell the idea that Byleth is just that strong. They turn the tide of battle whenever they arrive, single-handedly most of the time, and this is multiplied even further when they start to use Sothis's powers. Shez is quite literally forced to retreat, sometimes because they have absolutely no answer to their ability to stop time, and they only survive thanks to Byleth themselves preventing Sothis from finishing the job by reclaiming control of their body when they fight one-on-one. And so, yeah, Byleth is a demon on the battlefield. The turning point is of course Geralt being killed by Shez, which depending on the route has the cascading effect of leading to a character in each route dying and Byleth relying on Sothis even more for vengeance against them, marking what I would say is the first time things actually get personal for Byleth. And during these non-Byleth recruited paths, they are operating completely independently. Sure, in Scarlet Blaze, Claude hires the Geralt mercenaries in his last stand at Alel, but Byleth is out for vengeance all the same. From then on, Byleth's remaining arc is contained to that goal, and then they are killed. To be honest, I think the execution of Byleth as simply an antagonist is, in some routes, better for the plot, which I'll elaborate on later. And to put another way, I think the way Byleth is handled in Three Hopes as an enemy is mostly satisfying. Byleth as the antagonist is, like I said already, a force of nature. And if you asked someone who had no idea who Byleth was in Three Houses, or whatever prior role they had and just relied on what Three Hopes shows of them as an enemy, that person would most likely say they're pretty matter-of-fact, don't show much emotion, but they don't seem like a bad person. And that's all true. Byleth is quite simply a mercenary as far as Shez is concerned. Of course, things aren't as simple once Shez and Arval come face to face with their abnormal spatial warping power, which is literal time travel, but for the most part, and like I said before, Byleth's role in the story is sort of a Navarre archetype, an enemy mercenary who can be recruited to the allies' side. And like any quiet yet menacing mercenary, the natural intrigue to find out more about these types of characters permeates the moment you realize they're now on your side. Byleth, and I've not really changed my tune on this, is not a good character in Three Houses, in my opinion. In Three Houses, they're incredibly static, boring, and barely with a personality. And yeah, part of their cardboard persona directly has to do with how they were brought into the world, i.e. being a vessel for Sothis, like, yeah, of course, being emotionally stunted from how they were brought into the world is an objective truth of their character, and it's something you need to address when talking about this character seriously in Three Houses. But you'd be hard-pressed to convince me that the writers did a good job making Byleth a compelling character despite their circumstance. Byleth had no voice lines in cutscenes, no real thoughts of their own, and in my opinion, no charm at all. Yeah, their circumstances are different than, say, Robin, Corin, Chris, etc. Well, I mean, I guess there is only one more in Mark. But these characters had things to say, even if they were meant to represent the player. They had a noticeable amount of agency. This is part of why Shez is such a strong Avatar character, in my opinion. This is all to say that Byleth actually getting the chance to be someone is such a great thing. So now that we get to view Byleth from the other side, what are they really like? The matter-of-fact, dry, and analytical demeanor Byleth possesses rings in several T-quotes. Taking naturally to swordsmanship the moment they held one, calling Shez easy to fight for because of their intuitive commands, and otherwise just plainly answering whatever question Shez asks. And it may be so that they are reserved and emotionally distant, unwilling to divulge in any of their personal worries to Shez, as talking them out would be unhelpful. They also acknowledge that they share a unique connection between the two.
None of my worries would be helped by talking them out. I feel that you and I are very much alike. You have a different aura from my mercenary companions. It was hard to get used to at first.
Byleth often doesn't express warmth to others, but they will say things that clearly show they are caring, appreciative, and thoughtful in their own way, no matter how minor they are. I'm personally fond of these encounter quotes. It's not often where I can call Byleth endearing, but these interactions are exactly that. They ask to release a bug, they willingly give Byleth a piggyback ride when Shez injures themselves, and will play in the water. And yes, these encounter quotes aren't unique to Byleth as they're pulled from a pool of possible encounter scenarios, but nonetheless, these are all unique lines to them, and it does contribute to who Byleth is, which is the point of encounters and tea time to begin with. A similar dialogue moment occurs in the ending scene of the paralogue A Reason to Fight, anyway, where Byleth's lack of a sense of humor is played lightly when Shez jokes about needing to hold hands on the way back to camp from San Village after Geralt calls them kids, and Byleth actually thinks they have to hold hands. On the topic of Byleth and Shez, the two support conversations they have illustrate their budding companionship. The B support goes from an intense sparring session where Byleth tells Shez they're basically equals now, even though Byleth was holding back. They're both relying on their godlike powers blow for blow, but this transitions into a conversation about how each of them acquired such power, which then transitions into both characters hiding the truth behind the presences that hide within them. The A support is significant for a few reasons. 1. Shez reveals the truth of Arval and Epimenides to Byleth. 2. Byleth empathizes with Shez's regret of no longer being able to communicate with them. And 3. Assures Shez that despite Epimenides taking control of them as his vessel, it was Arval who was trying to protect them from harm. It's a kind end to this chain and does a fine job illustrating the budding camaraderie between the two.
I don't know if they were just using me, or if they had some other goal in mind. All I've got are a bunch of mysteries that I'll probably never solve.
I did notice one thing.
What's that?
It was when we were fighting and you were being manipulated. It seemed like Arval was trying to keep your body from getting hurt. They could have fought more recklessly. I don't see why it would have made a difference to them, but they were making sure you weren't harmed.
Seriously, Arval was protecting me?
It's just a feeling I got, but yes, I think that could have been the case.
I guess Arval's the only one who knows the truth. Or as the Seros folks say, only the goddess knows, right? But hey, thanks for telling me that. Really. It does make me feel better. I've got no choice now but to keep moving forward. Live out the destiny the two of us once shared. Funny, I came here to apologize, but you ended up cheering me up instead. I'll catch you later, okay?
Only the goddess knows, Well, the goddess may have been the one telling you that.
I think a good vantage point to continue the Byleth analysis is through the paralogue they share with Geralt and Leonie, where tensions rise between them and Leonie when Byleth very plainly states that helping the people of San drive out the poachers wasn't what they were assigned to do, and so they shouldn't, as Geralt states later, give out freebies like this. This upsets Leonie, and she questions Geralt as to how he raised such a cold person, followed up by her passive-aggressively calling out Byleth for not being reliable, which visibly angers them. A rare sight indeed. Now, this could be me, but why would Byleth show anger upon this exchange? Probably has to do with accusing Byleth of not caring about innocent lives, which is not what they meant to express. Maybe it has to do with Leonie questioning how Geralt raised them, as if to ask how could he have messed up his job as a father. But given the flow of the conversation, I'm leaning towards the first one. But that's not to say that how Geralt raised Byleth is not a point of contention at all. Byleth does not often express anger or sadness this, but as we've seen in both Three Houses and Three Hopes' main campaigns, anger and grief will overcome them upon Geralt's death. This scratches the surface as to how much Byleth cares about their father. A few quotes of Byleth acknowledges this, sure, but their love for Geralt comes out in their support together. The B support begins with Byleth trying to wash out fresh bloodstains from their cloak, and when Geralt asks them if they could just use their spare, they respond that they could, but they'd like to keep using this one. This makes him remember Citri and how she would say the exact same thing. He then begins to compare just how similar they are to Citri, how Citri used to never laugh or cry. It's at this moment where Geralt starts to feel regretful over how he raised them.
But I still see so much of her in you. When I was first getting to know her, I never saw her laugh or cry. Just like someone else I could mention.
You know, you never really used to talk about her, but you've been doing it a lot lately. Why is that?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe I'm feeling a little regret for dragging you into the mercenary life. You've never had a place to call home, and you don't have any friends your age. And it's been one bloody battle after another since this war broke out. If she were still alive, your life would be entirely different.
And to an extent, it's a reasonable doubt to have. Byleth was raised in isolation. Growing up in the mercenary band, they don't even know much about the Church of Seiros. That's like Ike levels of not knowing what Lagoos are. They've grown up with a sword in their hand, no friends their age, and lived a very atypical life. Not to mention, Geralt even had to leave Byleth behind sometimes and lie about them even existing in order to protect them from Rhea and the Church. Byleth's answer to this worry ends with them pleading, for lack of a better term, not to regret what he's done for them. Byleth is grateful and loves Geralt for everything he's done. They don't envy other young people or resent how they were raised in any way, but despite their effort to reassure him, they don't think it's enough. They still believe Geralt thinks he's done a poor job as a captain and a father to them. This leads to their A support, where Byleth appears and gives Geralt flowers as an expression of love.
I have something to give you.
Well, this is new. What is it?
Here.
Flowers? Oh, I'm really surprised. I mean, you've never given flowers to anyone before, have you?
I had to ask some of our allies for advice, because I wasn't sure the best way to communicate my feelings.
What do you mean?
I'm really thankful that you're my captain, but also that you're my father. I've never really told you that, so I wanted to make sure you knew.
Ah, kid.
When I asked, everyone said I should give you flowers. Apparently that's what they used to do back at the Officers' Academy.
Anyway, these flowers did the trick, kid. Consider your message delivered. Though, to be honest, I kind of already knew. You might not give a lot away, but you're not completely unreadable. Sorry for making you think I had no idea.
It is truly wholesome and moving to see Byleth go out of their way for the first time like this. Emotions are just things that Byleth does not know how to express very well at all, and this gesture and how they had to ask their allies how one would go about expressing gratitude is incredibly impactful as a show of character development. Geralt apologizes for making them think he had no idea just how much he meant to his kid, just before laughing at yet another parallel between Byleth and Citri. They both are drawn to the same kinds of flowers. The support heartwarmingly ends with Byleth vowing to make sure they will continue to express thankfulness to their dad so as to make sure Geralt doesn't have any more regrets about his past. It is truly a heartwarming support, and I wouldn't be surprised if it would make anyone misty-eyed because of it. To see Byleth express such a desire to go out of their way and dedicate personal growth to an emotional expression is huge, especially for someone where that kind of thing does not happen naturally for them. As both an enemy in the story and as an ally in the camp, Byleth's characterization is pretty solid, with Geralt's support with them, and even Manuela's support with him, which includes Byleth, being my personal favorite moments they have right now. But I would be extremely remiss if I didn't mention how disappointed I was with several very frustrating and, in my opinion, completely bad decisions the writers made with regards to Byleth as an ally in spite of what we have being good. Coming into Three Hopes, the anticipation for how Byleth's role would shake out was one of the most exciting and intriguing parts of the game, and why wouldn't it be? So much of the game's advertising made use of Byleth's new role. Entire trailers were dedicated to showcasing this. And for me, the prospect of recruiting Byleth and finally being able to see them developed as an ally was a natural thought given that many more playable characters were introduced. Since Byleth is the flagship character of Three Houses, I had very high expectations about their implementation. But what I mentioned in the first two sections of this video is, sadly, the best of what disappointingly little the game has on offer for them. Going back to Byleth's story integration, the only route where them being a recruitable ally actually makes a meaningful difference, and I use meaningful lightly, to finish the main campaign is in Scarlet Blaze. Because of Byleth and Geralt's aid in Edelgard's war effort, Claude remains her ally, instead of betraying her at the last moment in Alel, leading the war to be presumably resolved later. Azure Gleam nor Golden Wildfire have any change, no matter how minor, due to Byleth's recruitment, which, yeah, while disappointing in comparison, is made even more frustrating in Azure Gleam. Because at least in Scarlet Blaze, Byleth was more smoothly blended into the story. Azure Gleam, meanwhile, seems to not give any hoots about the consequences, i.e. Zaharas, of their recruitment, to the point where the story arguably breaks its own immersion and can cause distractions. Here's what I mean. Edelgard's role in Azure Gleam 180s from being the Emperor leading her army against the rest of Fódlan into being literally mind-controlled by Tallis to unquestionably serve his goals. At this point in the story, Edelgard as we know her is all but dead. Her time with us is over. She is now, as the community has named her, Babygard, speaking in a childlike manner, obeying orders from Tallis, and personally fighting on his behalf, or in some cases running away, lost and confused. The plot for the pre-Zaharas Shez vs. Byleth chapter plays out the same, but in Azure Gleam this time, Dimitri and Claude are together, searching for Shez and Edelgard, both up until Edelgard, still as her Babygard self, approaches the two unable to understand what is happening, nor who they are, before Epimenides conjures the spell of Zaharas and warps the three of them there. What happens next is quite confusing. Edelgard suddenly remembers who she was, and Dimitri and co. spend time catching up with everything that happened over the last 6 months. Her sudden 180 seems to be justified by this line by Claude here in battle.
This darkness is a mirror for the soul, and once a soul is imprisoned here, it is eternally severed from the real world.
Is that why Edelgard is returned to normal? Some trick of the darkness?
In other words, the influence of the outside world, Tallis' spell, has no effect here. So, conveniently, Tallis' spell is undone within Zaharas, and when they return to the normal world, it's completely business as usual. Edelgard is back to being Tallis' puppet, and unsurprisingly, this ass pull in Zaharas is not something I'm fond of. I think it's a lazy excuse to make Edelgard be the same person in all routes in Zaharas exclusively, and this is personally frustrating for me in the Explore section of Zaharas, as the support between Edelgard and Dimitri is the exact same throughout all routes, despite the circumstances being very different. The only difference from here on between Byleth's recruited and non-recruited endings is this one single line.
A man we believe to be Tallis was seen entering the monastery, with the Emperor following close behind.
So, she's fallen into his hands.
Evidently, this is also where Byleth's influence as an ally ends completely. They no longer have any influence on the story or its ending. They do not have a role in the plot beyond their presence awakening Epimenides. The sole acknowledgement of an alternate path in Azure Gleam is this, which, depending on how you feel about the final movie not changing at all, whether or not Dimitri knows Edelgard's condition firsthand in Zaharas, is understandably confusing, distracting, or worse, disappointing. Especially so when you consider that internal data suggests that an alternate ending for Azure Gleam was thought over enough for it to be listed in the game's event list. Compared to Scarlet Blaze, Byleth's influence in Azure Gleam is completely non-existent, and in my opinion makes it a worse route narratively than them as an enemy. Byleth as an enemy gives us Roderick's death, which results in a couple of emotional scenes between the Blue Lions and especially Dimitri and Felix. Similar sentiments are shared in Golden Wildfire, with Judith's death being a result of Claude's explicit use of Randolph and responsibility for his death, and the Imperial forces to act as meat shields against Catherine and the church at Aelel. And yes, it's very disappointing for me personally that neither Felix or Dimitri have any unique battle line against Byleth in this route. I will take how impactful and non-wasted Byleth is over the barely relevant alternate path. I know people will not agree with me, as this is a personal gripe, but this is all to say that Byleth's integration into Azure Gleam as an ally is comparatively the worst of the three, and I much prefer having them be an enemy. Another disappointing aspect of Byleth as an ally in general is the sheer lack of characterization they have. They have a total of 2 support chains. At the risk of going on quite a vent right now, should the flagship character of the Fodlan era of the series, the character who was heavily depended on for the game's advertising, and the character who is now in a role which allowed the writers to have the greatest opportunity to explore them as a person, be given this little content? In comparison, Monica, Rodrigue, and Holst have a paltry 3 support chains, but even that's higher than 2. I just don't understand what the writers were thinking. The arbitrary nature of Byleth's integration as an ally is still something I just can't get over. I once read that the writers may have chosen to make the endings, the Byleth alternate endings as well, incomplete and inconclusive, and the supports are much fewer in number and missing S supports so as not to invalidate or take away from Three Houses. But that argument folds since we're already talking about a different timeline altogether. The issue is quality control. You're not invalidating Three Houses, you're invalidating Three Hopes. This game has an unfinished story, has unfinished supports, and evidently missing gameplay. There are often times when I was playing and even exploring this game for other videos that this game didn't feel finished, but I digress. This video is about Byleth. To wrap it all up, Byleth's execution is very mixed for me. As advertised, Byleth being the antagonist is very solidly executed. They don't overstep their role as the enemy, all the while legitimately feeling menacing and on a higher level than Shez up until they finally attain the power they need to defeat them. Their supports, as sparing as they are, elevate their character greatly by emphasizing the lengths Byleth is willing to go for Geralt, in them being compelled to explore parts of themselves that are hard for them to express. If only there was more to say. These are my personal sentiments about Byleth in Three Hopes. Coming in with high expectations and them not being met was certainly a letdown. But hey, maybe someone watching feels differently. If so, let me know why. And don't forget to leave a like as well. Once again, this is all my opinion. This is the first video where I get to say the channel has finally passed 100,000 subscribers, which I am incredibly thankful for all the recent support. But just because I hit my dream milestone doesn't mean I'm going anywhere. So if you're new to the channel and you want to see more Fire Emblem content like this, please stick around and subscribe. It's free, easy, and helps the channel grow. That's all for today. See you next time. Deuces.
You